The Covenant of Halo are known for their very unique and alien weapons. While not being nearly as iconic as the Needler, the plasma rifle is still quite memorable in its own right. It's the backbone of the Covenant war machine, and like many weapons throughout Halo's almost 2-decade-long run, it's evolved and changed over the course of its existence. Let's take a look at these evolutions, shall we? Combat Evolved's development history is well documented. It was an ever-changing flurry of different versions, ambitions, and goals before being whittled down into the game that we remember on the original Xbox. The plasma rifle similarly went through a lot of changes and eventually sort of acted as a backbone for discovering what made Halo's combat loop click. During development, Bungie learned that instantaneous weapons that are almost hit scan are not fun to fight against. Sure, it's fun when you have them, but when the enemy does, it's just not that much fun. Due to this, the plasma rifle, which previously had a single-shot laser with an optional charge-up mechanic, was switched over to the automatic weapon we all know today. The goal of the weapon was to design something that would put players very much against a real danger, but with skill and knowledge could be easily dodged and eventually turned against the enemy. The Type 25 plasma rifle fires these bolts that will travel over a distance and need to be compensated for by leading your shots a little bit, and it's mostly known for its excellent shield stripping capabilities, which can force enemy elites to retreat or break down the shields of jackals that are in your way. What it's less remembered for by the modern Halo community was its unique ability to stun lock enemies when multiple shots begin landing. In campaign, each shot can visibly daze an elite and make him recoil, which is excellent for controlling the movement of enemies and making sure you always had control of a situation. It helps that it's the main weapon elites carry in the campaign, so it's quite common. On higher difficulties, it's a weapon to keep in your back pocket at most times and make heavy use of. In multiplayer, the plasma rifle's stun effect is incredibly advantageous to teams that have them. Not only does the stun effect lock down enemy players, it also slows down their sensitivity, which is helpful in objective modes like Capture the Flag. A lot of folks incorrectly say that Combat Evolved is a game where only the pistol matters, but there's very little that pistol can do to help you when you're actively being suppressed and stunned by an opponent's plasma rifle. Use it cooperatively with your team. Don't worry about getting killing sprees. Just focus on disabling troublesome enemies or hampering the enemy team's progress with objectives in a match. As it sits, the plasma rifle of Combat Evolved is one of the most unique sandbox tools in the game, and easily the most interesting version of the gun in the entire series. But with Combat Evolved out of the way, Bungie went on to Halo 2 and had new goals and ideas for that game's combat flow, which had ripple effects on the weapon sandbox. Halo 2 marked a turning point for Halo. Not only were the elites going to be playable in the campaign, which meant a rethinking of the sandbox, the approach to combat was changed as well to mirror the competition at that time, with an emphasis on things like cover, leaning mechanics, and slower, more tactical gameplay. Many features didn't make it into the game, like leaning and a lot of the thoughts towards tactical gameplay, and also a lot of cover and objects had to be cut out of environments for performance reasons, and this left Bungie very little time to retune the sandbox and AI balancing, so Halo 2 as it sits is kind of a messy game. The plasma rifle stun ability was removed, and instead it was given the ability to hold in one hand while holding another weapon in your other hand. Dual wielding was the hot new thing, and while cool in concept, the execution left many scars on the way that weapons were balanced. The plasma rifle's role is less defined in Halo 2. In the player's hands, it's not that useful unless paired with something like a magnum, so that you can drain shields with the rifle and then cap the enemy off with a headshot. It is kind of useful as a panic weapon when you feel yourself trapped with an enemy in close quarters and need something to quickly open them up to a melee attack, and, it does work well enough in multiplayer. But in the single player, there's little reason to use it, since it limits your ability to melee or use grenades when dual wielded. The plasma rifle in Halo 2 is serviceable, but not really remarkable due to all the changes made to it. This wasn't the end of it though, because Halo 2 also introduced players to the Brute Plasma Rifle. This weapon shows up in the campaign mission Gravemind and is seen carried by the Brute enemy types. It's the same model as the regular plasma rifle, only recolored to red and given an increased fire rate and damage output at the cost of rapid overheating. Despite being a quick recolor and a stat tweak, the Brute Plasma Rifle was such a strange addition that it went on to appear in other Halo games and even has a bit of a cult following within the Halo community. By the time of Halo 3, the Brute arsenal was boosted by more aesthetically appropriate weapons for these space apes, which meant this plasma rifle was constantly fighting with its cousin, the Brute Spiker, for player attention. Curiously, the Brute plasma rifle doesn't return, and the Brutes can sometimes be found using the standard Elite plasma rifle in Halo 3. The plasma rifle has been given a new makeover to make it much more reflective and alien-like. What's pretty cool is how much Halo 3's new approach to lighting gave the weapon's bolts these impressive glowing glares. During low lighting conditions in the campaign, it's quite satisfying to see your screen just light up with hot plasma glare as you discharge the weapon into a pack of flood. But how does the weapon perform? Statistically, it's been altered to sort of fuse the Brute plasma rifle and the standard plasma rifle into one gun. It now fires about as fast as the Brute variant while maintaining its accuracy. Its bolts tend to become wildly inaccurate after sustained fire, so it's smarter to fire this one in bursts. It's absolutely excellent at tearing down Flood and Sentinels, but outside of that, its place in the campaign sandbox is kind of a mystery due to its scarcity and lack of defining features to make it stand out. In multiplayer, it's a very similar situation. The Spiker is a much better alternative to the plasma rifle, and while the plasma rifle is not useless, it's not nearly as reliable as its Brute Spiker cousin, so it's generally wise to avoid it unless you're skilled at close quarters combat. The Halo 3 plasma rifle may be pretty, but that's about all it can boast as a weapon. It's a sad shadow of its former self. ODST is a game that takes place during the events of Halo 2, but running within the Halo 3 engine and gameplay systems. Many enemies, assets, animations, and models are reused, and this includes the Halo 3 Brutes. To make them fit in a Halo 2-ish setting more, the plasma rifle from Halo 3 was added, but it was recolored to appear like the Brute plasma rifle from Halo 2. Outside of the color change though, it performs identically to its Halo 3 counterpart. This is just a red plasma rifle. That being said, because ODST scrapped the dual wielding system and scaled back its weapon sandbox to add a little bit more focus, the plasma rifle does shine a bit more in this game than it did in the previous game, Halo 3. Brutes were also altered to have shields like the Elites, so now its shield stripping capabilities can be of some use to the player. It functions more organically in ODST than it does in Halo 3, but the darkest of days were just on the horizon for this once proud weapon. Halo Reach was Bungie's farewell to the Halo franchise, and they really went all out on it. The Elites were back as the main enemy command troops, and with them returned their iconic plasma rifle. Aesthetically, it's been heavily updated to reflect the more powerful Reach engine. Its grip was changed to look more alien and foreign to human hands. This strip thing that held the two halves together has been completely removed, and the weapon overall has a more aggressive and slanted look to it. The color was also altered a few times during development. In the Reach beta, it sported a more Halo 3-esque color, but in the final release, it was changed to a more muted tone that looks somewhat like the original Combat Evolved if you desaturate it. It's a really beautiful and faithful redesign of the weapon, and a model so high quality that it would actually go on to be used in next-gen Halo games because of how well this model holds up. How does it perform, though? Unfortunately, not so well. Invasion was a game type in Halo Reach that had one team play as Spartans and another team play as the Elites. And in order to make the loadouts of the two teams more evenly matched, the Plasma Repeater was designed to be the elite version of the assault rifle. The Plasma Repeater strips shields and kills well enough to be similar to the assault rifle, and because of this, the Plasma Rifle is virtually non-existent outside of the campaign and firefight. The Plasma Rifle was never designed to be a direct counter to the human assault rifle simply because it happens to also be an automatic weapon. The Plasma Rifle had a distinct role, and that role has now been mostly scrubbed away, a problem that gets worse in future games with the introduction of the Storm Rifle, which is even less interesting. In the campaign, it's fine. It can even be seen dual-wielded by elites. But as a gun, it's really on its own here. It has very little place in Halo Reach's sandbox, and its future in Halo seemed dark. And it was dark for a while, but thankfully this didn't last forever. The Plasma Rifle's next outing would be in a remaster of the original Halo, Combat Evolved Anniversary, where it's given the Halo Reach model and updated sound effects. While I love the model and the sounds of the gun, I find that it's less satisfying to use due to the plasma bolts being much harder to see than in the original game, which is a problem in general for Combat Evolved Anniversary. Things can get kind of lost in the visual noise, so it's really hard to track enemy fire and plasma bolts. It also makes an appearance in the campaign and multiplayer for Halo 2 Anniversary, where, like the other remaster, it here also sports the model from Halo Reach, albeit with better textures and recolored to look a bit more appropriate to Halo 2. In the multiplayer for Halo 2 Anniversary, which was made in the Halo 4 engine, it has a more glossy and rubbery look, and features different animations, but other than that, still mostly performs identically to its counterpart in the original Halo 2. It's certainly usable in close quarters, and when paired with other weapons, it's very good, but it's best to ignore it and just find better weapons. In Halo 4, 343 learned the wrong lessons from Halo Reach and just completely removed the plasma rifle and replaced it with the considerably less interesting Storm Rifle. The design is much less alien looking. In its performance, it's much closer to the assault rifle than even the plasma repeater from Reach. This is really just a blue assault rifle. It's not that interesting, and the plasma rifle makes no appearance in the entirety of Halo 4 outside of a cutscene and the whole campaign of Halo 5. Despite this, in 2016, the Brute plasma rifle was surprisingly added to the multiplayer of Halo 5 in the Memories of Reach update. Reach being a game that did not have the Brute plasma rifle, I might add. Halo 5 mostly misses the mark with its approach to weapons and weapon rolls. It's a game that values only lethality, so many classic weapons are considerably less interesting in the game. However, Halo 5's Brute plasma rifle happens to be a bit more interesting than one would expect. First things first, the model is still the Halo Reach model, with modified textures. It originally shipped in Halo 5 using the sound effects of the Halo 5 plasma pistol, but this was later changed in an update to a more unique sound that, while still not sounding like how a Halo plasma rifle should sound, were still quite satisfying in their own right. The Halo 5 Brute plasma rifle is definitely an interesting addition to the Halo 5 sandbox because it makes a small effort to go back to a more classic style by having the gun be fantastic at stripping shields while less effective against unshielded targets. It's still quite capable to just mow down enemies and get killing sprees, and especially since the addition of aiming down the sights means that most guns are now useful well past the ranges that they should be. It's still nice though to see an effort made to make it stand out, but it is quite sad to see it struggling to be unique in Halo 5's rather one-dimensional weapon sandbox. It does come with 2 additional variants that can be bought in loot boxes for use in the Warzone modes or spawned in Forge for custom games. The Sorrow of Tish is a variant that has tighter projectile spread, which means it's unusually useful at long range, and it also allows the user to sustain fire for longer than normal before needing to vent the heat from the gun. And finally, the Scale of Soyrapt, while being slightly more powerful, comes with the unique ability to deal extra damage on melee attacks and kill most enemies in one hit. Its melee animation is also quite different to reflect this increased melee damage. The plasma rifle was a gun that started out really strong and never really managed to top its first outing, but that didn't stop it from being recognized as the standard firearm of the Covenant elites. With Halo Infinite promising a return to a more familiar-looking Halo universe, many wonder if the less interesting Storm Rifle will be retired to allow this classic weapon to shine once more. What's your favorite iteration of the plasma rifle? And what would you like me to break down next? Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.